After nearly a decade of sustained excellence, are the Kansas City Chiefs losing their grip on the NFL's throne? Have we seen the last of one of the NFL's great tight ends in Travis Kelce? Has he played his last game with the Kansas City Chiefs? And can the Denver Broncos replicate the formula used by the Philadelphia Eagles to help close the gap on their division rival? All questions to be answered on Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan's newest weekday digital show, The Rundown. Let's get into it, starting with the end result of the Super Bowl slaughter as the Eagles cruise their way past the Kansas City Chiefs by a score of 40-22 that was not as close as even that lopsided score might indicate. This was a game that I will be the first to admit I sat in this very chair right here on Friday and predicted a Kansas City Chief victory, as did Will Peterson, who sat next to me. And boy, could I not have been more wrong. The Eagles, who admittedly had a markedly better roster at virtually every position on the depth chart, save for the quarterback position. It's not a stretch to say that Patrick Mahomes is not only a better, but a more accomplished quarterback at this point in his career than Jalen Hurts. Just like it's not a question to say that Andy Reid at this point in his career is light years ahead of Nick Sirianni at the same post. But the Eagles proved to be an exception to that rule, which would indicate that if you have the better coach and the better quarterback, far more often than not, you're going to find yourself successful in the NFL. They proved to be the exception to that rule as they cruised to a victory over the Kansas City Chiefs that was really never in question from the jump. I mean, it was a situation where Patrick Mahomes may have played his worst professional football game of his career, and it couldn't have happened on a bigger stage. It's not like we've never seen Patrick Mahomes get blown out. He lost handedly to Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl just a handful of years ago, but this somehow even eclipsed that. And I don't know about you out there in Broncos country, but I certainly had a feeling as we crept into the third quarter and the Chiefs had not even crossed midfield, and they were clearly one-dimensional in terms of their offensive production. But that box score for the Kansas City Chiefs, especially as it relates to the rushing game, looked a lot like we saw here with the Denver Broncos in Bo Nix, in that the quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, was the team's leading rusher. And that, as we saw, is not a recipe for success if you want to win any NFL game, let alone the Super Bowl against the best team from the opposing conference. You can see it there on the screen, 4 carries for 25 yards, finishing as the Kansas City Chiefs' leading rusher behind an abysmal output from capable rushers like Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco, even Samaje Perine getting in the mix there, although Patrick Mahomes kind of gave him the cold shoulder mid-game as he dapped up everybody else on the offense but Samaje. So not the best look for him. But yeah, I felt a lot like I felt during Broncos games going, there's no way this team can win when their quarterback is their leading rusher. Now, again, as the Eagles proved to be an exception to the rule, that was actually the case with Philadelphia as well, but it looked markedly different. Because if you had told me before the game that Saquon Barkley was going to have 25 rushes for 57 yards, and that was going to be his production with no touchdowns, I would have told you Kansas City Chiefs won that game. But Saquon Barkley did have that stat line, and they did win the game going away. The difference was Jalen Hurts, who we've seen run the ball in a lot of contexts, not just the tush push, which he's kind of become famous for. He had some very key, timely, impactful, and important runs throughout that game to not only extend drives, but to continue to wear and grind down that defense, including a rushing touchdown on the ground. So Jalen Hurts, a guy whose, I think, career up to this point was pretty much maligned as it relates to his perception as a quarterback and what he brings to the position alongside his cohorts who've maybe experienced more success up to this point in his career. He was a second-round pick, which anytime a quarterback's not taken in the first round, it automatically invites criticism and skepticism about their commitment, there being the team's commitment to that player and their faith in them to lead the organization, but also from a skills standpoint, how effective that player is going to be able to be to reach the highest mountaintop in the NFL that was the Super Bowl. And if you had told me just after draft day that Jalen Hurts, the second-round quarterback, the khaki pants quarterback, as our favorite Mike Evans likes to refer to him as, would win a Super Bowl before Joe Burrow, before Justin Herbert, before Tua Tagovailoa, 3 quarterbacks who were taken ahead of him and have had arguably better situations early on in their career, that Jalen Hurts would win a Super Bowl before them, I would have taken you up on that bet, and clearly I would have been wrong, as Jalen Hurts has now been named Super Bowl 59 MVP. So he's a Super Bowl champion and a Super Bowl MVP just 5 or 6 years into his young NFL career, putting him ahead of those big household names who I think we all agree most teams in the NFL would kill to have on their roster. So now that we've seen this and we've seen Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs get blown out for a second time in the Super Bowl, you have to ask a question that at the tail end now of 7 years of sustained dominance with 7 straight AFC Championship appearances and multiple Super Bowl wins to start a career on a faster pace than even the pretty undisputed greatest of all time in Tom Brady, are we seeing the end of the Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Kansas City Chiefs dynasty? Is that dynasty that has ruled the NFL for the better part of a decade now grinding to a slow but inevitable halt? I think it's a fair question. I personally would say no, because I think we've seen this formula happen before. The Chiefs got blown out by Tampa Bay and Tom Brady in that Super Bowl and then turned around and won 2 in the next 3 or 4 years. So it's all a matter of how you respond and reload. And just because a team loses on the biggest stage in the biggest fashion, this was almost eclipsing the Denver Broncos blowout loss to the Seattle Seahawks, who trailed by 1 point at 36. We saw the Kansas City Chiefs trailing by 34 late into the third quarter of this game before they threw up some very deceptive garbage time points that I think made Patrick Mahomes' stat line very, very evasive in terms of the evaluation of it. But if you want to take the Broncos as an example, look at the Broncos, who had the best offensive year, especially up to that point in the history of the NFL, with Peyton Manning in 2013, rewriting all the record books. They go to the Super Bowl as that juggernaut offense and come up against the Legion of Boom in Seattle and get completely eviscerated in every possible way. From the moment the snap went over Peyton Manning's head, you had a feeling that the Broncos just weren't going to be in that game. But then they turn around 2 years later, they strip it down to the studs. John Elway pulls a complete 180 after building one of the greatest, if not the greatest offenses in NFL history, turns it completely around, and then shifts the focus to the defensive side of the ball, building one of, if not the greatest defensive assemblances in NFL history, and they come back on top in Super Bowl 50. So there's no reason to assume that just because the Chiefs lost in this fashion to the Philadelphia Eagles, who were markedly better as a roster, and especially in what became the hinging deciding factor in this game, which is in the trenches on the offensive and defensive line, there's no reason to assume that just because that happened yesterday in front of the whole world, that the Chiefs are now going to fall apart and be done. We do know that this could be Travis Kelce's last game. There's been a lot of uncertainty as to the future of one of the greatest tight ends to ever play football at the NFL level. And will he retire? I think if they had three-peated, you could reasonably suspect that might be the case. But who knows? This is a guy who's incredibly competitive, who has a great situation with his head coach in Andy Reid and his quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, that even at an aging level, he has pieces around him, the two most important pieces, to still remain productive if he so chooses. Could he follow in his brother's footsteps? Jason, who's now been retired from the Philadelphia Eagles for a year and watches them go on to win the Super Bowl, which has got to be a little bit painful, knowing how integral he was as a part of that offense and that offensive line. But could he follow in Jason's footsteps and say, I don't need to go through the grind and the battering of an NFL season again and again and again because of all the other things I can do? I can go be a podcast host. I can go be on TV. I can go be Taylor's sideshow on tour if I really wanted to be, frankly. He has a lot of options in front of him. So there's some uncertainty there. There's some uncertainty as to how the Kansas City Chiefs are going to have to restructure and rebuild things in response to this. But the bottom line is, when you have Patrick Mahomes, who maybe hasn't eclipsed Tom Brady as the greatest of all time yet, is still on a trajectory to at least attempt to do so. And I personally have said I think he's the only human being currently alive on planet Earth who has a chance to chase that, to the degree that I don't even think there's a quarterback who's 2 and 3 years old right now, literally cutting his teeth as a human being, who's going to be able to do that. I think it's Patrick Mahomes's alone for the next several decades if he's going to make an attempt to do that. If you have that at your quarterback position and you have a head coach in Andy Reid, who is one of and may go down as the greatest head coach to ever coach in the NFL, the rest of it becomes relative window dressing. for lack of a better word. You have the foundation of your house built. You have the floor and the roof over the head. Now you just have to decide what you want the floor plan to look like. So they, as they've done for the last 6 or 7 years, get to go to the proverbial candy store and pick out skill position players on the offensive side of the ball. They can beef up the trenches on the offensive and defensive line. They can make improvements to their secondary as you have players like Nick Bolton and others who are going to be phasing potentially out of their contracts in Kansas City. So I don't think yet that the dynasty that is the Kansas City Chiefs has been dethroned, but I do think that the window is closing a little bit more each and every year, that they don't find a way to continually stay on top as they have been. And that brings up the question of the Denver Broncos, the AFC West rival of the Kansas City Chiefs, the Broncos being a team that has lived in the relative basement of the division, or at most right there in that awkward purgatory middle ground where they aren't bad enough to really blow it up and justify a complete rebuild, but they're not good enough to make do with the progress that they have made, kind of just that awful middle ground. The Broncos now with Bo Nix and with Sean Payton, who seem to be the beginning of a potential budding quarterback head coach relationship. How can they replicate the Philadelphia Eagles formula and the model, which in my articulation, my estimation, is they beefed up the trenches on both sides of the ball. They found impact players on the offensive skill position spots in order to surround their quarterback and ask him to do as little as possible. We saw Pete Carroll do that with Russell Wilson in Seattle for a number of years, and we've seen what it now looks like in hindsight when Russell Wilson doesn't have that kind of protection. I think Bo Nix was asked to do a lot more in his rookie season in the NFL than you would typically like a quarterback to do. But I think Sean Payton used that strategy as a way to build mettle and trust with his young quarterback, who he, again, if you forgot, just ask him, handpicked and was the 6th quarterback taken off the board in the first 12 picks of the NFL draft. But these two seem to have a mesh and a meld that they're building. So can the Denver Broncos, Sean Payton, George Payton, etc., replicate the Philadelphia Eagles formula in order to close the gap and potentially even catch the Kansas City Chiefs within a reasonable timeline? I believe that they can, but it hinges on Sean Payton and George Payton needing to be Howie Roseman, who by and large has been one of the best executives in the NFL and has hit on so many more draft picks, not just early, but late, that have allowed his team to be surrounded by skill position players and defensive players that are at such a high caliber that it's not incumbent on Jalen Hurts to be what Patrick Mahomes was to the Chiefs this year, which was to try to be Atlas and hold the entire weight of the organization on his back. And he did it enough to get to the Super Bowl, but eventually the dam had to break, and it did. I want to bring in everybody's favorite James Marilat, digital editor at denversports.com, who finds himself in the hot seat today next to me. James, what was your initial impression of the way that game played out? Did you predict a Kansas City win and were just blatantly wrong like me? Did you predict it to be closer than it was like I did and were just blatantly wrong like I was? What was your read on it?
All of the above. I thought the Chiefs would win. I'd even talked myself into it was okay. Like, that's all right. We get to see greatness. We get to see a dynasty. I'm going to kind of enjoy watching it happen. And then as soon as the game started going and they started playing poorly and they started getting blasted by the Eagles, I was like, this is so great that I did the 180 in terms of kind of my approach to it. But look, you talked about it. It was in the trenches. The front four of Philadelphia is defensively is why they won the game. They were able to get pressure on Patrick Mahomes all game long, and they didn't blitz a single time. Not one blitz. If you can get pressure with 4 and have 7 guys in coverage, it's pretty impossible to move the ball very effectively through the air because you're keeping in extra guys to protect. You got 3 or 4 receivers against 7 DBs. It just isn't going to happen. The Chiefs couldn't run the ball really either. So it was fun to watch them be on the other side of it. It was really a joy.
James, I'm going to say something that I can't believe that I'm going to say because of what we went through here in this town. And I know Jalen Hurts was awarded Super Bowl MVP, and he had to be because he's the player that's eligible for it. Vic Fangio should have been named Super Bowl MVP of that game.
Yeah.
Vic Fangio, that same crusty, curmudgeon-y old fart that we had to sit for years, multiple years in Denver, and watch him blatantly not care about things on the offensive side of the ball, mismanage things from a game management standpoint, and just completely fall on his face as a head coach. He was brilliant all season long in the defensive role because it's less responsibility. He gets to be up there. I get all that. But James, you brought it up. Not only did he not have to blitz zero times in order to get 6 sacks and 3 turnovers on Patrick Mahomes, but he's a guy who, if you want to put it on a grand scope of things in terms of the scale of how good he was, he brought up the stat to the team. And I had seen this stat come out before the game, and I couldn't remember exactly who said it or where to find it. But it was brought up after the fact by Sal Paolantonio as part of the Super Bowl breakdown coverage on ESPN. The Eagles on artificial turf this season were 5-0, giving up an average of 11.8 points per game, less than 12 points a game in the NFL, and were undefeated on the 5 occasions, now 6 occasions, that they played on artificial turf. And that's the kind of level of attention to detail that Vic Fangio was bringing to it, because he knows what they have on the defensive side of the ball from a speed standpoint, both in the secondary and in the front 7. And he was able to use that fact that how they play and the metrics that they have when playing on artificial turf as a way to help game plan around that. Again, I blasted Vic Fangio when he was here, and justifiably so.
Yes.
But man, he was brilliant.
All right, his defense was great yesterday, but he didn't call a single blitz. He didn't have to mix it up.
He didn't have to.
I get it, but he didn't really have to do anything. Like, they ran essentially the same defense the whole time.
James, Andy Reid is a head coach at the NFL level too, and he makes adjustments on the offense. And we've seen the Chiefs who have been down but never out, and you've got them on the ropes, and then they find a way to do it. Not only did they not do that, they were never allowed off the mat. Patrick Mahomes threw a touchdown pass after Nick Sirianni had already been given a Gatorade bath.
But right, which was pretty comical. But if you're not able to get pressure with your front 4, and you're having to mix it up, and you got to disguise things, and you got to bring blitzes, and you got to guess, are they running or passing? That's when a defensive coordinator really has to be on his game. If you're getting that kind of pressure with 4 and you don't blitz a single time, you're mixing up coverages here and there, but there's really not that much different. They essentially every play they did the same thing.
But you still have to call a defense that's not blitzing to accomplish those same things. So you're almost taking it as, because he didn't have to blitz at all, and it was I think it might have been the only time in the Super Bowl era that's happened in the Super Bowl, that a defense has not sent a single blitz all game. You're taking the fact that he didn't blitz and just saying, well, he was on autopilot the whole time.
Correct.
But I disagree, because you still have to, if you're not going to blitz, you still have to be able to call defense and mix up your schemes, at least the looks of it. Because again, you have a quarterback on the other side of the ball, and Patrick Mahomes, who's trying to dissect defenses. And not only did he not blitz, he never really had to leave a true cover 4 defense for more than a handful of plays in the entire game.
You're making my point.
No, James, because he had to disguise all of that pre-snap. He had to make sure that wasn't diagnosable, to the degree that when the Chiefs go at halftime, and Andy Reid admitted it, that they basically just had to do what Sean Payton loves to do, which is abandon the run game when it's not working. He still was able to maintain that level of dominance, factoring in the adjustments that the offense was making in Kansas City.
I get it, but if his front 4 didn't play the way they did, not only getting after Patrick
his front
Mahomes,
4 that's coached by him.
Yeah, but okay, you think they were doing that because of something Vic Fangio showed them on the practice field?
James, I'm going to be honest, technique? I do. I do.
I
firmly disagree. And it kills me a little bit even saying it now, because I just hated so much about his time here and him as an NFL mind. And we were like mocking the evil genius. It was an evil genius thing last night. It's
the equivalent of acting like Chuck Daly did a great job at the 1992 Olympics. Oh, what a coaching job. What a masterful, what a masterful effort he had. I mean, just getting Mike out there and getting Magic out there and making sure Chuck was happy. Like, I mean,
have we seen the last?
His defense played great, but he didn't have to do all that much. The front 4 made all the difference. If they didn't play that way, he would have had to mix up coverages, mix in blitzes, try to get into the guessing game of what are they doing.
And you don't think, based on the fact that they were a dominant defense all season long, that he would have been able to do that? You're just assuming that he would forget?
Yeah, I watched him for 3 seasons here. I have a lot of doubts of what Vic Fangio can do.
Vic Fangio admitted to our own Andrew Mason, who had boots on the ground in New Orleans and was covering all things Super Bowl for us here at Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan. Vic told Mace that this is likely his last coaching stop in the NFL for a guy whose career has spanned multiple decades, and he's seen a lot and been around a lot in terms of different organizations, that this is probably his last stop. So the last game we see Vic Fangio coach will for all intents and purposes be for the Philadelphia Eagles. Have we seen Travis Kelce play his last game in the NFL, let alone for the Kansas City Chiefs?
I don't think so. I don't think that's the way he wants to go out. He didn't play particularly well. His team played terrible. I don't think he's going to be done. But he's got the Hollywood career. He's got the media career. He's got the...
I don't think it can be understated, for the record, that him being able to observe what Jason Kelce has done in his first full year of retirement, which has been not only not skip a beat, but arguably be more busy and more in demand. I mean, Jason and Kylie have been turned into basically pop culture superstars.
Yeah.
They got their own TV shows. They're making appearances on late night. They're, hosting all these different things. They're being filmed on the street. So and I think this is the thing with all modern day athletes now, the amount of opportunity that exists and the financial pathways that are available of significant revenue, not maybe necessarily NFL mega contract money, but pretty decent, money, a la the Peyton Manning route, that's available to more than just the Peyton Mannings now. And I think Travis Kelce, without his alignment with Taylor Swift that he has now gained, would have been eligible for those things already. So I think that should and probably will factor into the decision. But I'm with you. I don't know that he wants to end on this sour note. Now, you could argue winning 2 Super Bowls in 3 years is not riding off into the sunset, a la John Elway and Peyton Manning. But it's pretty close for a guy who's got almost enough rings to fit a full hand.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is one of those things that this is the decision you make in a month, 6 weeks, when all of a sudden it's time to start going in, lifting, getting in shape, getting ready for the next year. And do you have the motivation or not? Right? Because there are all of those other options to him. We watched Tom Brady broadcast the game yesterday. 10-year, $375 million deal. I get it. Travis Kelce's not.
His broadcasts were worth 10% of that, in my opinion. It was
not even that.
Broadcasting might be the first thing that Tom Brady's just genuinely not legendary.
But you see the kind of deals like Pat McAfee got from ESPN. You see the kind of money that Joe Rogan makes as a podcaster, and it's like there are other things he can go do that he can make serious money and start building an empire in a second career. So it wouldn't shock me if he left. I just think the competitor in him won't want to go out that way. It was just that bad of a performance for everyone, but I do not think this is, okay, the Chiefs are done and the clock struck midnight. This was their Buster Douglas moment and they've been knocked on their can and everybody figured them out. They were knocked on their can by Tom Brady and the Bucs, 31-9. And they've been the best team in football since then. So I just think while it'd be nice to think that, and as a Broncos fan, I want that to be the case, I don't think all of a sudden the mystique is gone. They just had a bad day and they came up against a team that played great on that day. The Eagles were great.
Yeah, they went 17-3 in the regular season.
Exactly.
So,
but watching that game yesterday, weren't you like, how did the Eagles ever lose?
Yeah.
Their defense is so good. Offensively, they've got 2 great receivers. They've got a really good tight end. They got the best back in football. If you take him away, their quarterback can beat you either through the air or with his feet. Like, you almost like, how do you defend these guys? They were the best team in the league. I think clearly the right team won the Super Bowl. I know they weren't even the 1 seed in the NFC. Detroit was, but Philly was the best team in the league, and they showed
No,
it
they
yesterday.
were, and we've talked about it in the past, kind of like we had it with certain Broncos games, like the last week against the Chiefs when they were playing against the B squad and all that. But it just felt like from the jump, regardless of who they were playing against, that just felt like a day that everything was going to go the Broncos' way. Devon Valek bobbles that crazy catch in the back of the end zone. You get like an 80-yard lateral run, between Bo Nix and Javonte that gets called back and whatever. This just felt like from the coin flip. Maybe after the first 30 seconds or so of the game, after they got the questionable pass interference call on A.J. Brown, where I tweeted at them, like, who had over 25 and a half seconds on the first questionable whistle in this game. But basically after that, it felt like every single thing was going Philadelphia's way, to the degree where, like I said earlier, if you had told me that Saquon Barkley was going to have 25 carries for 57 yards, I would have said the Chiefs went around and run that game. But what you wouldn't have known is the context that Saquon also had a team-high 7 targets for 6 receptions in the receiving game and was integral in the blocking game. And it was Jalen Hurts who was making these dagger-esque runs and things like that. It just felt like no matter what you had Cooper DeJean with a pick six on his birthday. So just so we're clear, because I think he became the second NFL player ever to score a touchdown in a Super Bowl on their birthday. And the last one was in like 19. It had to be phrased as an NFL championship because the last one was like 1947.
Wow.
Which was pre-Super Bowl era. You know, what's funny is that Saquon Barkley's birthday was also yesterday.
Yeah.
And I can almost guarantee you that stat and that graphic by the Fox crew about a player scoring in a Super Bowl on their birthday was built for Saquon Barkley.
100%.
And when Cooper DeJean scored first, they had to be like, oh my gosh, we have to scramble and change all this behind the scenes and just throw it out there.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that they were on that radar. As good as Cooper DeJean's season as he had, there's no way they were on that for him and not Saquon.
No, and it was just a total team effort. Like Jalen Hurts was a worthy MVP, but it's not like he threw for 350 yards or he rushed for $180. Like he was good. And their defense was great as a group, but it wasn't like there was a guy. Nobody had a Von Miller type performance on defense to win MVP on that
Sweat
side
had
of the
like
ball.
3 sacks or 3.5 or whatever it was.
But it just was kind of, there wasn't an overwhelming candidate. So it's like, well, the quarterback probably played better than anybody else. So
quarterbacks win the award even when there is a Von Miller sometimes standout performance, because it's like, well, are you not going to give Tom Brady the Super Bowl MVP?
Well, and if a receiver has 11 catches, it's like, well, who had to throw him the ball 11 times?
Exactly. That kind of thing.
But he was a worthy winner. It was just a total team effort. They were the better team. And Kansas City, man, they just looked awful basically from the jump on offense.
I think it was the worst game Patrick Mahomes has played in his NFL career.
He did look human.
He looked human. And it was really, again, from the jump, he seemed uncomfortable. He seemed off. He tried to connect with Kelce early, which is usually their kind of kickstart, get out of a jam thing. It's just him and Kelce connect on a 7, 8, 9 yard pass or whatever, and it's too low. It's in the dirt. He's diving for it.
Well, and he had the third down one to Hopkins where Hopkins was all by himself, and he kind of stumbles and doesn't even get a hand on the ball. And that's the one where Chris Jones like fell off the bench, just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
It was just that kind of day for the Chiefs. Like, what on earth is going on? Like they had something bad in their breakfast or something. It was a bizarre day, but as a Broncos fan, it was enjoyable. Other than watching the Broncos win the Super Bowl, that's as much fun as I've had watching a Super Bowl game.
Really?
It was fantastic.
Wow.
Watching them get blown out.
Just from a satisfactory,
last year was a great game,
villain.
But then it's the Chiefs coming through to win it. You're like, it kind of ruins it.
Yeah.
Yesterday was just smiling from the opening kickoff to the final gun.
Parting thoughts on the way out. What did you think of Kendrick Lamar's halftime performance?
I was cooking. I didn't watch a lot of it. So, we eat during halftime. So I missed everybody who watched it, though, loved it. And my kids, that's the target audience. They thought it was great.
I will say this. I enjoy Kendrick Lamar's music. I think that he's one of the few remaining true lyricists in the hip hop world. I think he kind of embodies that old style or philosophy that I grew up on and that existed, even before me a little bit, where the lyrics actually meant something and there was symbolism behind it. I think he is the master of the poetic jab or the diss, with the symbolism. He brought Serena Williams out there to dance, which was a failed shot at Drake, who used to date Serena Williams, and it got stalkery and weird, and the things he was doing with the background dancers and all of that. So I appreciated that part of it, but I thought it was kind of boring. What was your favorite? I think this is always the most contested debate every year around this time of year. What was your favorite or least favorite Super Bowl commercial?
The least favorite was Seal as a Seal.
Are you kidding me? I thought that was one of the best.
No, that was creepy.
No, but that's the point, James. It's shock value. It's shock value. It's the Mountain Dew does this. They had Puppy Monkey Baby, where you had like the Sid from Toy Story level concoction of a puppy, a monkey, and a baby. It was awful and it was creepy. But I thought about it last week.
I know. But this is a sign of my age. I'm getting old and sentimental. My favorite commercial was the little girl who planted the potato. And then it grew, and then she put the potato in the truck for all the Lay's potato chips. That was cute.
You didn't like the horse bringing the beer, the Budweiser beer, all the way to the bar. It's like a horse walks into a bar, but knocking out cancer, the Muhammad Ali kind of cancer situation about childhood cancer and the fight that goes up against that. That was great.
Shane Gillis firing Bud Lights out of a t-shirt cannon.
Is that my leaf blower?
That was fun. That was fun.
Oh yeah, no, because it was that. What did he say? That they're having the block party and Peyton Manning shows up, and you got all these things, and it's like, your your lawnmower grills burgers? Is like, no, my leaf blower cuts, grill steaks.
My grill,
Yeah,
my grill
cuts
the
grass.
grass. That's what
Yeah,
it was.
so good. So good.
That was really good. So no, I thought the commercials were pretty good. All around was a really good day.
Well, I think that although us here in Broncos country, other than, pitching a hater kind of vote, I don't think that a lot of us had a lot of skin in the game as it relates to rooting for the two teams. It's just anybody but the Chiefs. But I do think, and I think it's going to be an expansive conversation over the next week about whether or not the Broncos, who are now rebuilding their team around, Bo Nix with Sean Payton, can they do things and take steps to kind of replicate the Philadelphia Eagles formula in terms of surrounding, building a roster that takes some of the pressure off of the quarterback in Jalen Hurts and allows him to operate effectively within the system and do the things that he's asked to do, a la Russell Wilson. You could argue that Tom Brady was like that for portions of his career, especially early on with the defenses and the supporting cast that he had. I think there's going to be a lot of conversation as we head into a very interesting offseason about what that looks like and whether or not, again, the gap between Kansas City and the rest of the NFL and the rest of the division, how much, if at all, has that shrink. So all things to come and all great conversations to have here on The Rundown. We will catch you same time, same place tomorrow.
I do what I love what I do is second nature to put in the work. I only improve